Welcome everybody. Nice to have you here tonight. I'm Andrea. I'm working at MOIA for already 5.5 years, so quite a long time. I'm director of product, and I was really happy that we finally managed to host a meetup with the Social Developers Club. I think roughly 1 or 1.5 years ago I met Julia the first time, and back then we decided we need to host a meetup together, and then still it took quite some time until we make it reality. So really happy that we're finally here, and also really happy that my colleague Finn will give you a really amazing talk hopefully today. Looking forward to it. And apart from that, you already have seen Patty, who is there up front with also, you can see her with MOIA hoodie. So if you have any questions in the aftermath around MOIA, you can also reach out to Patty and myself. And if you have questions around the talk from Finn, you can reach out to him. And with that, I would already shortly hand over to Julia. And enjoy the evening.
Thank you. Okay, I was prepared for a little bit longer talk. Welcome to our meetup tonight, The Road to Autonomous Driving. Yeah, you probably saw this picture already, so we can skip it. Nice. So I'm Julia. I'm a founder of Social Developers Club. We are an inclusive tech community beyond code, so also other topics that makes technology accessible to all. So this is our mission. And we do this by hosting events like tonight, so meetups, but also conferences and workshops. So yeah, you probably have seen our meetup page. We also have a website and all the social media channels, but you can also ask me or other ones from the team to get more information about us. Usually we do meetups once a month, but this is the last one before the summer break. So in July and August, we are not going to host meetups, but we will be back in September. Yay! So then we will start again with monthly meetups. And after that, I have a couple more announcements. So I hope you all have your phones to scan a lot of QR codes now. We're also hosting DevFest this year again in October, and the tickets are already live. I don't know how we managed that so early this year, but you still have access to the early bird tickets right now, and this is the QR code, but you'll find it also if you Google it on Eventbrite. Also, we are looking for speakers for the DevFest. So if you are into Android, Flutter, Firebase, Angular, Golang, AI, and other community topics, leadership topics, we have security this year. So we have pretty much all topics from the Google space covered. It's also super first-time speaker-friendly because we have also smaller stages. So if you want to try this out and finally get on stage, please apply. You have, I think, 40 days left. So no pressure, but yes, a little pressure. Also, there's another conference coming up. It's still a little bit time, but yeah, we have a save the date for the Social Developers Conference in March. That's also always one of my favorite events in the year because it's a super cool, cozy conference right in the middle of St. Pauli. And to make this conference super cool for you, we also have this year a community survey, so we would like to get to know you better and make the program even more fitting for you. And because this is super small, we have a bigger QR code that you can scan now. Right, I love it too. Yeah. I knew this made you scan it. Nice. Thank you, Daniel, for generating this awesome. Yeah. Okay, I don't see any more phones up. So next, who has been on a Social Developers Club event before? Oh, a lot of new people, nice. So everyone that's been here before also knows our mascot, I would say, Pac-Man. And this is kind of our only rule we have. Whenever you stand around in a circle and network, please always make sure to leave a little space open in your circle so anytime anyone can join your group and get into the conversation easily. And if you see people don't making this, please tell them to open up. Also, you probably already have seen me walking around taking some pictures. If you don't want to be on pictures, that's totally fine. Please let me know, then you get a little sticker from me, and then we don't publish your pictures. Also, these were a lot of announcements, but there are more to come. So if you don't want to miss anything, you can get on our WhatsApp group. It's new, so we're just trying this out, but it's pretty fun so far. And if you don't want to follow us on WhatsApp, then there are plenty of other options. We are on Meetup, LinkedIn, Twitter, or X, Instagram, and Discord. I think that's enough from my side. So, okay, let's start again. No. So I'm very happy to be at MOIA today. Like Andrea said, we have been planning this forever, and I've been so excited since then, because today we have Finn with us, who is now going to tell us a lot about self-driving cars. Thank you.
All right. Let's start with a bit of housekeeping. There's another QR code to scan, and it's not optional. Please scan this one if you are here if you also have food and drinks, so that we can have the proper accounting afterwards. If you're looking for the restrooms, they are right over here in the back, in case you didn't notice yet. And you can see very well, right? So usually when we are people tend to sit on the floor. Sometimes even our CEO has been spotted to sit in the middle of the floor. And also the second row, you can easily just go sit on the second row. There's genuinely a mat back there to stretch your leg, so feel free. Or people tend to join the Teams meeting or the live stream here again to see what's going on. All right, let's talk about autonomous driving and in particular testing. So I put autonomous driving there so that more people would come on this hashtag to listen to me than usual when I talk about testing, because that's boring. So thanks for joining. A few words of who I am. So I'm Finn, that's always me, even though I look a bit different. I finished my school somewhere here in northern Germany. I studied physics. And when I finished, I was accidentally ending up in a startup called Wimdu, which is basically, or was, a clone of Airbnb that never lifted, and then joined a consultancy a few years later. Oh, noise, let's make that go away. And my last client that I joined in this consultancy was MOIA 4.5 years ago, and I liked it, and I stayed. And I'm mute again. And then the microphone is muted, nice. So give me 1 second. All right, so let's dive in. That's the bit of private part. I was a handballer. I love Krav Maga. If you want to have a Krav Maga session, I'm teaching it every Monday evening in Schleswig-Holstein, so just make sure to book an appointment. I used to sail and go salsa dancing where I met my wife, but we're not doing it so much anymore because we have children and live in the beautiful countryside now, but maybe at some point of time again. And where do I work? I work for MOIA. So you're all people of Hamburg. Who did not sit in such a vehicle until now? Okay, so quite some people. Then I'm not completely boring you now, talking about what we do here. So in general, the idea is to contribute to Verkehrswende, change of mobility in Hamburg, right? At some point of time, Hamburg wants to transform its traffic and how many pedestrians can walk in the city. And we hope that we can contribute something towards it. We won't save the world alone, but together with the city of Hamburg, together with micromobility, together with other concepts of public transportation, we can achieve a picture like this. And somebody photoshopped 3 Plutos in there and it looked fabulous. So that's exactly how it could work. And how we attempt it is that we own everything from the wheel of the vehicle to the app, right? So the entire charging infrastructure, the entire fleet and fleet management around it, all the driver, the shifts, the rostering around it. And then when we got all of this right and some of these vehicles drive off our yard, maybe we meet a person somewhere in the city and can pick them up. And if we're particularly lucky, we have 4 or 5 people sitting in this vehicle. And what many people of you probably know is that you often see these vehicles passing by empty. Right? Who has seen empty MOIAs going around the city? So everyone this time. And the reason is that a lot of traffic is still one-dimensional. So how do you commute? You commute into the city, or a lot of you probably, in the morning and out of the city in the evening. There are very few people who on a daily basis have the exact opposite commute, who live in the exact city center and work in the outskirts or in the countryside around Hamburg. That means to transport a person or 2 or 3, you always have to travel back empty. And that's not nice for anybody who's like, oh, the MOIA is empty again. It's also a problem in terms of how much cost we have for all of the drivers, which is why ever since we started MOIA, the bet is that we get to these autonomous vehicles. Because if we have 10,000, like overly exaggerating, they can be in the city center in the evening, drive the people out, stay somewhere in the countryside until the next morning, and then they take the people back. And we can't do that with real drivers because 10,000 people would have to commute on their own again, and that doesn't work. So that's the bit of context. We are also already testing with real-world people, so everybody who doesn't know it, that's Mr. Wissing, our Federal Minister of Transportation, and we were brave enough to pop him into one of our vehicles. So we are testing with real people of flesh and blood, where you would notice where they go missing. So let's talk about testing and how we test. Slightly shifting gears now from MOIA to a bit of testing in general and my view on testing. And I once made these pictures and made these muffins, baked them, to talk about a product that we all know. You know this product. What makes this muffin a particularly high quality muffin? Size, width, crunchy or not, or chocolate, right? That's a high quality muffin, isn't it? However, yeah, better?
It's quite tempting.
You can also make it a bit larger for you, that you can also watch, right? The problem is, if you slice it open, there's no chocolate inside. And that's always the first image that comes to my mind when I talk about testing, like somebody builds some software and then a few days later you pass by, you're like, oh, can I test this? And that's like sprinkling chocolate on top of something that was already baked or built in terms of software, almost the same. So the question is, how do we get the chocolate inside? Or how do we make an overall chocolate muffin? Also in terms of autonomous driving and testing all of these things. So when we talk about testing, I want to start with one hypothesis here, which is testing does not improve quality, which is always a nice statement to get started on a talk about testing anything. And the reason really is testing is a way to analyze the state of a software after it's been literally built and deployed somewhere, right? So you're just assessing the state of something. In a picture again, let's say this dragon is testing this car. And what will happen to the car? It will melt, or at least the tires will melt, the entire color will peel off, the windows will burst. A lot of things will happen to this car, and we know that it breaks down at 1,500 degrees Celsius, and then we know that's good enough for everyday life. But one thing is not happening here. This car will not improve in quality, right? So if you are talking about testing in general, it doesn't improve quality. And then the question is, how do we actually improve, right? Then you need to walk in your processes, then you need to analyze what happens, then you file a bug report or a new feature or whatever, and then you walk forward again. And that's what I want to look at also in the particular examples of what we learned in autonomous driving. And what we learned actually was that everything old is new again. So it's not like we invented the whole thing new, how to test or something. We discovered a lot of old things. And I always like this book, Lessons Learned in Software Testing. It's from 2002. And It's pre-agile, so the book talks of these new evolutionary processes that somehow change on the way and so on. So it's that old, but a lot of the approaches in there are still true. Like, it works really means it appears to meet some requirements to some degree. Right? That's still how it works today. If somebody tells me it works, it's like, oh, okay, let's see. So let's look at how we test and how fast and how our projects work. So maybe something that you heard as well in your context, and that's the same for us in the autonomous driving where we have to balance it. Looking at my peer here, my product director peer, that's usually how our conversations start, how the project starts, how an autonomous driving project starts, or how new milestones arrive in an autonomous driving project or in any project. And I like to get into this a bit to understand how we can use that now, because that usually doesn't go well with quality or testing. And the reason for it is usually when you look at revenue over time and you have some amazing idea, maybe somebody had an idea this morning while brushing the teeth of a new startup that you want to start. So that's your product lifecycle that you're looking up at. At first you invest, right? All of your pocket money is gone. Then you launch at some point of time. From that, probably you launch here and then someone later after heavy marketing, you're profitable. And at some point your product dies. Nobody wants it anymore. And this struggle is, if you delay your launch, I don't know if you know, there's some newspaper article stating that MOIA will have autonomous driving vehicles on the streets in 2019. Right? That was the initial assumption. Then there were some who said 2024 probably, so midway of 24. Let's see how we get there. But the thing is, the product still dies at the same time because the market is not waiting for you. As a drastic example, if you want to bring this product to market today, you will fail, right? Because you missed the market. The market for this product is already gone. You all know what this is still, right? We had a group of kids here the other day, Boys and Girls Boys Day, and I was asking if they can guess what it is, and the best guess was that it's a portable oven. Because apparently you can put something in the middle now. So that's basically so you have your delayed launch. That means you have the famous cost of delay that everybody's throwing around in meetings then. And you have the reduced revenue. And yeah, maybe some of you have been in this, what's the English term? The Spannungsfeld in this. Sorry? In this tension basically, yes, between different stakeholders, or you have been yourself on one of the sides. And then from a quality perspective, you would say, wait, like opposite statement, speed, wait, because looking at annual cost of the US economy on how much defects in their software cost them, that was approximated some years ago. It's like, do you want to be part of that cost? And of course, no business wants to. Which means for testing, to come to testing now, and the same for us, that's a chart from NASA, how expensive it is to fix bugs that you deployed somewhere in a relative term. So it's much more expensive, not just for NASA when you crash probes on Mars, but for anyone. Also, if you bring the vehicles here out in the streets, it has to be super safe and secure and so on. But it's super expensive if you find defects late. And what you look at this block, if you're scared of cost, if I just scared you of the few billion euros, then you would say, okay, let's put a gate here to make sure no defect escapes us and goes from some kind of testing into operations. And the problem is, testing does not improve quality. So that itself is not improving. How do we get earlier into the process? And what's the cheapest way to fix errors? Of course, then to look at the requirements. And that is what we call shift left in general in the entire testing industry. This is where we say we want to be involved very, very early in the requirements making. And then we have our first hashtag in general, everything old is new again. So BDD. We spent the larger part of March and April, I think, to define the exact use cases on the customer journey again in order to derive what we need to do in our autonomous driving project. 2 months of PowerPoints with use cases, basically. Really, not kidding. So that's exactly the same thing. We let it go a bit. We were a bit too schluderig. We were not working good enough on it. We were a bit fuzzy on the edges. So we had to work on it again and improve. And the other thing, shifting left a bit less, is looking into coding and then the first stages of testing. And that's also what we did. So maybe you've seen the news 2 years back about Argo AI, yes, the first company that Volkswagen partnered with to build a self-driving system, the kit inside the vehicle. And I think it was one of the biggest investments Volkswagen ever did. And we started to work with them, we started to integrate with them, we started to test with them, and they went bankrupt. And it didn't work out, and the entire project was stopped with them as a partner. It's all in the news, so not disclosing some super secrets here. The problem for us at this point of time, and now we're partnering with a new company, that you can also look up if it's as interesting. The problem for us was some way into the project, we were in this state. We had no self-driving system, we had no simulation around it, we had no real vehicle, but we already had some software built for 1.5 years. So it's like a colleague put it the other day, it was like old person coming to the young people and saying, back then we had nothing. And the problem was then to continue developing, because we did have, at that point of time, so that's 1.5 years back, already our basic passenger app flow, like how would you book an AD ride, what's different to when you go home tonight, the entire operator flow, because for an operator of a vehicle, they maybe sometimes have to interfere with the vehicle because it can't handle every last situation on its own. And also to test the flows of the passengers inside the vehicle, because if there's no driver anymore, who makes sure that you're belted and that you didn't put a Christmas tree in the middle of the vehicle? Which happened, not making it up. So how do you connect these things then? And looking at the architecture, the highest level architecture of what we have now, so we have some components that are running inside the vehicle, and then we have some services, some 200 services who make up our generic architecture in order to serve our app and give you a nice experience when you go home. And in the particular parts of working with the vehicle, we have our own backend that deals with the handling, what I mentioned, of the passengers, understanding that there's no Christmas tree lying around or that all luggage is securely stored. Then we have some part running inside the vehicle. It's probably going to have to do something with understanding what's happening on the video. And then we are connecting to the other company who's building the actual self-driving system, the one that really decides to go left or not or hit the brake. And we are interacting with it very, very fast in the vehicle. And we are also interacting with their backend system. And of course, there's also some connection there. And the problem is, if that is gone, what's the only leverage that we have? And also there, it took the breakdown of an entire partner inside the project to understand that everything that we have to do is simply provide elaborate mocks for it. Right? It's as simple as that in the end. If we mock enough of the onboard components inside small and easy hardware, and if we write mocks for the SDS that just give us the bare information that we need in order to continue developing, it's the same thing all over again, just on a higher abstraction architecture, if you want, that involves more components, more teams, and so on. If you then add a bit of self-service handling around that you can spin up these mocks and tear them down, then suddenly you start to enable your entire team, all the developers, even more. And that enables us. So it's basically, I'm cheating a bit, right? I just write virtual vehicle here, but the rest is things that you can read in books since 20 years. But it's really still the same patterns, the same, and it took us 2 years to generate that learning that it also applies here. And what we achieve then is that of the activities of having automated tests, of having manual end-to-end tests in general on the hardware, on a test bench, and then the real testing on the real vehicle at some point when it's there, we shifted all of the efforts left to go into a lot of automated testing, which means we went from the waiting for the vehicle for 2 more years And then with high effort, high cost, and very, very slow testing, we moved here where it's faster, cheaper, and less effort. And you can find this is also a very, very old picture. It looks very fancy with the slides here, but it's a very old picture of effort in testing. I think we are still in the process of learning. We had one of these events again in April, where we tested here and a lot and a lot and a lot. And at some point of time, we made it work for a showcase. And then everybody said, nice, it works. So let's continue here. And we are still in the process of, not at MOIA, but on the overall project across the different companies, in the process of learning to move all of the stuff down there. It will take some more time. And why is that? Why is it? This looks easy, right? If I ask you now, where do you want to put your money? You're like, left side. So why do we tend to work so much on this side? Now I step back and talk about the generic thing again, and then we dive into the MOIA AD example. And that has to do something with the test strategy that you may or may not apply in your projects, in your work. So looking at our app, when I talk to Matze, and we rarely talk about things like this, but it would be nice, right?
I would ask why it's an iOS.
It's a wrong device to bring you as near. So Matze is our prime Android developer, and I brought the iOS picture. Shame on me. We would sit down and say like, okay, how does information get to the app? And we'll say, there are 2 data stores, and then there are 3 or 4 services, and then they provide the info, and there's something in the middle. And then we start drawing, and then we start drawing more boxes, and there's like, this is a shared data store, and there's a circular dependency, and then we ask the other teams. And then you end up with the architecture that looks like something like this, right? If you work in an not V model, everything is pre-planned context of Agile, following an Agile principle of working software over comprehensive documentation. You tend to go to working software instead of documentation, and then you have to discover this in the very end. Happened to some of you, maybe? And if you then say, oh fuck, how do we test that? The conceptually easiest part is to say end-to-end. Right? Because you basically put one shell around it all, then you give a group of people the task to say, like, here are the 100 requirements, please make sure they are accurate. And then those people will start working, and because we're a bit late in the project and testing has to be done very fast now, there is no time to have the weird conversation about the cone of effort, and it's too late anyway, so we go. And what we need to do instead, and that's, again, it's not improving quality really, because you're just testing something at the very end. So instead, look at the single units. Now that's a service, yeah? Thousands, 10,000 lines of code. You have classes, you have components, you have units in there as well that you would want to test, but on an architecture picture, the same wording applies again. Test these units, these services, use the mocks to mock your environments, they're accurate. Make sure that your mocks are still up to date. Don't test the databases. That's not so smart. Test the interactions and the interactions of the services. And then you put a thin layer of end-to-end test still around. And that, everything old is new again, sorry my friends, is nothing but the very good old testing pyramid that says test wide at the bottom, make sure of your integration. Don't make it a sand glass, right? If you have a lot of unit tests and then you do nothing and then you wait for somebody else to end-to-end test, then you have this sand glass and you have no clue about what's happening in all of these yellow fields. And then you're agile or similar. The question now is, how does it apply to these vehicles? Right, so we have now in our hub in one spec, we have a couple of vehicles standing around. You see Rosa here, who's leading all of our testing, the integration and the end-to-end testing. You can see many blurred screens inside the vehicle. So apparently there's some software running and we want to get them on the streets all the time. How does this picture now translate to this setup of maybe a bit higher complexity? And I stayed on the abstract, and I'm taking one more level to the abstract because I don't want to talk about unit testings now on the computing units inside the vehicle. I rather want to have a look at how we integrate and what are our units. Abstractly speaking, we have a couple of companies, some company 1, that is building a mobility app in general, rather working agile. Maybe you get the hint of who I mean. And then we have maybe a company 2 and 3 and 4 who are doing different stuff, different things. So one company is providing the core self-driving system and doing some very basic integration tests, giving it to some other company or part of the project who integrates that, who also has some vehicle engineering components, and all of that is integrated again on the vehicle software level, and all of that is integrated again on the passenger journey side, and then somebody's end-to-end testing. Interestingly here, so this dashed line in the middle, marks agile software development from vehicle development following the strong V model. So if, random example, Volkswagen builds a car, they are planning it one time, and then they are building it 100,000 times or more. That means you should really get your planning right to some extent, because otherwise if you have a small defect, you have to recall your vehicles. Super expensive. So they have, for some good reasons maybe even, a different approach, and we are interfacing all of that across the companies. So is it the smartest idea to wait until all the artifacts arrive here, or better, skip all of these steps and just put it here and then end-to-end test everything, which may or may not have happened in between? No, because again, this is the most cumbersome, ineffective way to test. So in one case, we were going out to the hub, opening the vehicle, starting it in order to understand that this error didn't happen, like the actual release of new software. Very expensive. So this is something that we came up, this picture, without the company abstractions, but the actual setup in the project, is the outcome of 3 days of workshopping together with the other companies or departments of the different companies, and a lot of alignment and talking about who does what on what level, who's the single person. Then you put people or department behind it saying like, who's the person I have to ask if this error isn't working? Like who's the person here checking this error so that we don't have to do it over here in the back. And if you tilt this now, then you see that it's again basically nothing else but the testing pyramid, starting with the smallest unit, the actual development units. We actually call that all of integration and end-to-end testing. So it was nice when I made the slides that I didn't have to change the wording even, because we're still following this, trying to follow this similar approach. It's really, really hard to do this with V model, upside down, V model following companies on an iterative approach following all of this, because they said we planned well, we just throw it together. And we're following a different approach in iteratively seeing and plugging things together and see if it still works. The next thing on this level that I want to talk about is TDD, test-driven development. I'm a huge fan, many are not. So who's in which camp? Hands up if you're TDD, team TDD, hands up. It's fewer and fewer each time I talk about it. Maybe I have to change at some point of time. Idea of TDD in general, not being religious about it now. If you just start to code, if you don't think about TDD, you're like, some requirement, let me try out if this works. You start to implement something, all of your tests are green, right? Because there's no test for what you do. Then you finish your feature, then you start to refactor, then you make it nicer. And then you're in the stand-up. Have you ever been in the stand-up where a person said, I just have to add a few tests, and then you haven't seen them for 2 weeks? Yeah? That's because they found their red bar. That's because they found out where it's not working. It means they have to refactor again, and they basically have to start, because that's their model of operation. They're trying out again how it might work better. I didn't invent that. That's also from an old book. And eventually it's green and the feature is deployed and everybody's so happy we got this piece out. It also means you're getting late feedback, so you fail slow. Congratulations to everybody who didn't raise your hand, you're failing slow. How does that feel? Maybe you want to consider something different. So what's different? You start thinking, Like, what do I want to do? What do we want to achieve? And you start implementing your test and it fails because there's no functionality providing the business value you hopefully put in your test case. And then you work against this green bar. And then you can, quote from the book, aggressively refactor against the entire code base. How cool would that be? What does this mean now in the concept, or in the context of everything that I shared so far? Ah yeah, and you fail fast, like that's what everybody wants to do, always sounds nice. So we had this generic setup of how we integrate the different parts. We wanted to shift left and have early testing and so on. On this macro architecture with the mocks. And what we're talking now across the different companies and departments and so on are actual contract tests. Hands up if you heard of contract tests. So very few people. I'll reference a blog later where you can read up if you want. Contract testing basically means that, let's take Matze again, and let's say now Matze is a different company and he's providing some rather backend service to me, and I have some requirements towards him, so I'm writing the test then, or we're different teams. And I'm like, this is my requirements towards your interface or API, and then I give him my test and say, please put it into your pipeline. And that's no-go, right? Nobody else controls if I'm in the team and somebody says, put this test of mine into your pipeline, I'm like, go away. I want full control over my pipeline. This is why it's such a strange concept. But the idea is that if Matze lets it run, and maybe non-blocking even the pipeline, he would notice immediately when he breaks our contract. Like not our social contract or work-related, but the contract of how we want to exchange information on the API level. And that's what we're actually discussing inside this entire setup in those workshops with those other companies. And that will take a long time. So this is new since beginning of June, end of May. I think we started these discussions end of May, so this is where we went. And the last thing that we model out then is the path to production. Who knows what a path to production is? As a hashtag, some few people. No people? Path to production models out. I can recommend this one. He's a former colleague of mine. He's working at Stack Overflow now. He's writing a lot of interesting blog posts. One of them was actually the first Google finding when I looked for a visualization of path to production. You're looking at everything that you do throughout, like what steps do you execute, what tools do you have, what people need to do something, and then you model out all the things that need to be done to get an artifact to production. Once somebody says, I have something that can be deployed now, everybody gave a thumbs up in the team. And then you can start to optimize it. Then you can say like, 90 minutes, too long. How can we shorten that if you want to have a short way there? Our path to production looks like, why is that animations? That makes no sense. Looks like this, more or less, again, on abstract company levels. Somebody is working on the self-driving system with a backend, testing the whole thing inside a real vehicle. They are releasing an artifact, if you remember, the thing that builds up, to company number 3, who is validating on it. That stands for hardware in the loop, which is a very, very, very elaborate test setup. Imagine a room double this size, full of hardware to just see if these artifacts work. And they say, yes, what this other company, because we have no trust, right? If somebody says it's done, it's just meeting some requirements to some degree, so we better check it. Then we add more functionality to the vehicle. We continue testing. We have a mock of the mobility provider here now that we test again. We're also connecting that to the vehicle, testing inside a real vehicle. And then at some point of time, we connect to all of the apps and the famous clouds in order to test the full customer or passenger journey inside the real vehicle. Again, it looks so simple then in the end. I could run down in 30 seconds. That was also part of the many, many workshops over the last half a year that we had, just to understand which company is testing which components, or should test which components, so that it serves the other picture that we had. And when you have all of this together, then you did your homework in terms of you have your testing strategy, you have your path to production, you have your contract testing maybe in place. Then all that you need is to look into your team setup to have a good team who can work on that. And what we follow at MOIA in general, look at this guy here. So everybody who's just seeing him from the back, this is how he looks from the front. We're looking, when we look at team setups, we're looking at a book called Team Topologies and a pattern where you define teams based on their interaction and what they are contributing to your business. We don't have a testing team per se. We have a lot of stream-aligned teams, and they are stream-aligned because they are aligned to business value, and they work in such a flow that it's like a stream flowing down somewhere. That's the idea of the name. So we have people in all of these teams who have then to get together in order to test all of these functionalities inside the vehicles. So what's the best way to set up one of those stream-aligned teams or many of them? In my personal opinion, so let's look at these two teams. You had your idea this morning that we discussed earlier for your startup. I give you €1 million. Do you want to work with this team or with this team? Not normalizing alcohol here, feel free to have a beer later, but who's the team that you want to collaborate with rather? This one, right? And why? Because there's food, not normalizing alcohol, there's food, there's snacks, they look happy, maybe they are interacting a bit more.
They get to sit.
Then this, they also get to sit. Yes, they look a little bit like you on the wall. You're going to be punished. But they interact more, they talk more with each other, maybe they provide what we call a safer space towards each other to provide ideas and exchange ideas. So you can also see, like Steph is the tech lead, Alexandra worked as backend, also as PO for some time inside the team. So it's one of the nicest team I work with. Sorry, included people from MOIA, accepted of course. Because it's also one of the teams where I have to give almost, as a director of engineering now again, almost no support. They can handle all of the things usually by themselves. And what I attribute this to is looking at these diverse teams. There are a lot of reasons how diverse teams improve your entire setup of your company. Like long list of points you can read up very easily. The ones that I want to point out actually are the last ones here. Diverse teams, this I think from a Gartner's study, all of the points that I copied here. They promote innovation. Can we use that here for our project? Maybe the strategic planning that I just mentioned, putting all of these pieces together, the product development overall, the increased productivity of the team in general. That's what everybody, also then we agree suddenly, business and I agree, like increased productivity, nice. And they can handle higher complexity topics, which is really nice because actually what we're giving them is, so we talked about all of the generic testing concepts, looking at the path to production, the testing pyramid inside, the test strategy spanning across companies and their components this is a super simplified architecture of a couple of hundred services, is a complexity that is incredibly hard to handle. So I'm very happy to have people, and not just of one kind, who are looking at these things from different perspectives. Because talking about testing, I talked about testing now from a very technical perspective. For AD, there's a completely different feel to it. We're basically introducing a new technology to society. And most of us, or all of us, know what happened already in other examples to minorities in our society when we introduced new technologies. As a random example, this is an analysis of the accuracy on facial analysis, how well it worked for different skins. So white male, nice facial recognition, congratulations. And the same is true for us, right? We are introducing, people assume that AD is going to be a disruptive technology that is entering our streets on everyday life. So we have to be really careful on how we build this and how we test this. If our testing represents not just light males, because then we would optimize for it. And is it actually happening? So that's a chart from a transport operator in Norway who already had some AD pilot, and asked the participants afterwards how much they liked it and how safe they felt. And all the men were like, awesome, new technology, I like it. 100%. Whereas the women had a different perspective on this. And if we look at ourselves, or if we look at the majority of the teams, who's the majority of people building this software? So it's man for man in this example then, which makes it really hard to introduce new technology to society from a business perspective, and it's just the wrong thing to do. There are a few things that we do to, I don't want to say prevent, but to improve. First of all, so you saw this chart here. It's like a group of 55 people, so we can argue about it later, how representative it is or not. We are working together with the Technical University of Munich and the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. We're also looking at another university at the moment to also model that. I don't have the actual data on the gender in this specific case, but they are modeling the entire transport behavior of entire cities based on surveys with 20,000 people. So in this way, we get a much larger sample size. We know how people actually behave, and we can simulate that towards our services that we design, towards our product that we model out. And we have one team here who takes care of just modeling out our ideas, how we would provide our service and what impact it would have on the entire population of Hamburg. Very fancy simulations. If you're ever to some fair where you see a MOIA booth with a big screen and a lot of tiny dots moving around, then you see 1.5 million people modeled and simulated on an academic niveau in Hamburg. Another thing that we did some time back now, but I still want to recommend it, is to work with a responsible tech playbook, to look into how you can handle technology in a responsible way when you unleash something on society. It's also not just maybe you remembered in the beginning, I was at ThoughtWorks sometimes, or maybe I'm just making an advertisement, but it's actually a collaboration with the United Nations, and it's on the United Nations webpage where you can download and see this playbook. And it's a PDF full of exercises and basically games again that you can play. Like if I say a retrospective is a game, there are a lot of games inside that you can play with your team to look at what impact your technology will have on society. And to give two examples, one is the consequence scanning, where you particularly sit down and model out what's the consequence really of your technology, introducing it, looking from different perspectives in order to model it out and mitigate, or the ethical explorer, this nice field guide here to help you navigate the impact of your technological change. And in order to give you some time to digest and read it, I'm ending the talk here. The last QR codes, I promise. The ethical tech playbook on the side here, and if you want to read more on contract testing side there. So you can have a look, play with the playbook, really have a look. It's really nice. If you want to have even the contact to the author, one of the authors, happy to connect you somewhere on the LinkedIn world. And that concludes us. Thank you for coming tonight. I hope you can take something out of it.
All right, we have time for some questions. Nice, okay, then I can be first. Oh, okay. That's just for the live stream, so.
Okay, so let me first say thank you very much for organizing this and for this awesome talk. I think we are all here very lucky and blessed to have this opportunity, so thank you very much for all of this. On the technical side, also thanks very much for bringing these old ideas. It's quite refreshing actually to see them. I'm wondering, since you, if I understand this correctly, you started relatively recently with this new organization which you presented to us, like with testing interfaces and so on. Is there maybe anything clear now what will be the problem like with this new approach? Like, do you see something in practice once when you start deploying this? You have a team organization, you have some architectures which are rather different than the previous one. I'm just wondering, is there any lessons maybe which you can share with us that we maybe don't repeat the same thing? So are there any mistakes, what you see in this approach? Thanks very much.
So that's the nice cliffhanger for the next meetup in about 1 year. Because as I mentioned, some of the things, like as simple, I didn't want to say stupid, but as simple as they are in terms of basic ideas behind them, getting to them took 3 years. Right? So it's starting with the Argo AI and then a bit of downward trends, like Volkswagen was looking for a new SDS provider, now we have one, we're ramping up again. Then you have a new party, then you have to line all of this again, none of the processes are working, the product is slightly different, the interactions, the API are different, you have to start all of these conversations. And you also, that's what I meant with speed, and wait, you're also doing it just in time usually, right? So the first time that I thought about testing concepts in this context was in 2019, when there was nothing. And like, how much do you, if I then start to define everything up front, then I'm the true living embodiment of the V model, which is not exactly what we want to follow here, right? We want to see and iteratively work on it. And that means with all of the ideas rather from the agile space, you come a bit too late to the party when you interface with the V model, and they're like, we have it all settled since 2 years. And maybe that's the learning. It's not a mistake yet for me because I wouldn't know how to do it differently. The next time I still wouldn't start to model our testing 3 years in advance still, because I still believe in the agile principles to work on software. And we are not, skipping back for 1 second, all the things where you want to know which mistakes we make are happening in these arrows, right? That's the interesting part. This bubble, company 3 doing some predefined test, that's going to work, but the handover and all of that, that's going to fail. And we defined this structure a couple of weeks back. So it's not exactly working progress across different companies with thousands of employees. Has not that much settled down that we can make these mistakes. So we're actually waiting for the first one to find its way. You could say we are learning a lot here. And maybe you guessed that our MOIA world is rather up here, so we are not too exposed to all of the mistakes yet. We are happy to share in about a year, I hope.
More questions? Also, I was really excited to see the first self-driving MOIA last Wednesday. For me, the first time. Yeah,
outside
around
in the
the
city.
Alster. Yeah.
Very nice, yeah.
What do you think are the biggest challenges we will be facing with this technology evolving, like getting to self-driving vehicles?
If you mean we as a society,
Yes.
really the adoption of that. I was once on a fair 2 years back, I think, where somebody from the ADAC came to me, so the German General Club for Cyclists. We have this ADAC for all the vehicle drivers, everybody knows them, we have the same for cyclists. Mm-hmm. And the guy came and said, like, did you consider if there's a self-driving vehicle and there's a person with slow adoption of this new technology behind that vehicle, and that person is going a bit crazy because they're super scared about the vehicle and doing weird stuff, and behind them is a cyclist. Like, what did you define for that scenario? Was this actual question? Someone in the field was like, ooh, difficult. And I think these secondary effects, we can guess a lot of the primary effects. How does a vehicle stop? How can people board or not? Recently we learned that it's not good if the vehicle stops in the middle of the street and people have to cross 2 lanes in order to get in, right? Those are the obvious learnings, and you can define that. How the person behind the vehicle behaves, how the cyclist behind that one behaves, that's going to be very, very interesting. I want to phrase it optimistically, interesting to learn, as long as not people are hurt, right? Because this technology can also hurt people if we're not careful enough. And that it has to be super safe, simply speaking. Making sure that this doesn't happen, and that's not working, so it's gonna happen. And we have to make sure that everything that we can prevents that, so that everybody gets home safely.
Nice. Also, if I have another one, do you have a tip for us how we can get our tech teams excited about testing? Do you have like anything you'd like to share?
My personal way, so I'm not working in teams anymore, unfortunately, but when I worked in a team, also the team that I joined in MOIA, when the first day that I came, so you're not joining the first day tomorrow, but I always took the testing column off the stand-up wall. It was still physical walls pre-corona, so I was just walking there, first stand-up, it was like, Finnis here, he knows a lot about testing, we're taking this column off the wall. Okay. I was like, what? And then I said, why? Is testing, like, is quality only happening at the end or through the entire process? Do you care about quality? Everyone's like, yeah, we care about quality. And then I said, okay, so let's see where we need to test what, when, shifting left. The other thing that I always did, maybe that's a bit more practical, also if you're already in the team and don't want to be that radical, I was always suggesting to come to the point where we deploy every commit to production, in case maybe you're doing that already, so that tip is gone as well. Yeah. If you don't, you just go and say, today we start. And then a lot of people will not like that idea, right? Yeah. And they will tell you we can't do that because, and because, and because, and because, and because. And those are 5 good reasons, 5 to-dos, basically, where you can start working. It has a lot to do around testing, trust in your pipeline inside the team. We don't trust our pipeline. We have too many flaky tests. We don't have enough tests. We always need the monitoring on our dev environment in order to find and whatnot. And that gave me like for the last few teams, really my to-do list of what things to handle. And if you have the full trust in your team ability, in your processes and your pipeline, that you can deploy every commit, then you probably deliver high quality. Okay. Probably, yeah. Hopefully.
Good.
So, thank you. What are some of the most high priority tests that you presumably conduct?
Did you understand?
What are some of the highest priority tests that we presumably conduct right now?
Yes, at this stage.
At this stage where we are, I showed the arrow of where we are still struggling, like the very beginning, we are trying to make an end-to-end test happen at all. Right?
Yes,
the first, if you're in the entire pyramid, at some point of time you come to end-to-end testing, and that's usually long journeys. And we are just trying to execute a basic just. We're also succeeding, but that's the single. There are not too many test cases on that level, so that's the highest priority still.
Okay, so in terms of those tests, how much of those are bound to have security risks?
Tests that have security risks?
No, sorry, let me rephrase. How many of the situations are there that are bound to be more prone to have security risks that you need to have test cases for? Because I see it as a technology, as you said, that this can actually hurt people. So if there are security breaches, we are more prone to have consequences. So what kind of security breaches or security tests are there that you are keeping at a high priority at this point?
So what I will not expose is what exact security cases we do test or not.
Okay.
I'm always going back to this picture. Can I go back to another so that it's not always the same, actually? Wait. No, I think it's still the best. So our perspective is, you can't see, huh?
Yes.
I was always here, back here, end to end. This perspective, security needs to happen not here, but here again, right? That's the same as quality. So here is where it needs to be implemented. Here's where it needs to be tested thoroughly, including people who are specialized in this field that we also have at MOIA, because that's too late to do detailed, like this would be the highest level, the easiest to get to security breaches. Again, slow and super expensive.
Indeed.
So it's all of the different cases in here. I would say I would even dare to say if we prioritize security testing here, we're doing something absolutely wrong. So I answer by none at all, no.
Okay, so it's happening at the very beginning, and on each step, consequently, those tests are being repeatedly tested. Thank you.
Yes, in different dimensions of what security means or breachability, or yes. Also, it's not just testing, scanning, and so on, all of these things.
Interesting. You had a question?
Yeah. So at the beginning you mentioned that there is this problem with empty MOIAs, and one way to solve this is the autonomous driving. But until to get to this point, what are the other possibilities to breach this?
The question was, the question was in the very beginning, I talked about the empty vehicles. I made some fun of ourselves. It's not okay. To show a different picture for some, or not. So the question was, with all the empty vehicles that drive around, and waiting for AD to save us all in the cost that we put there, what are other ways maybe or other options to breach it? If anybody has an idea, I'm very happy to know, because we haven't found them. Otherwise, we would be applying them properly. But there's like, who can drive a car? It's like humans, and we start to experiment with machines, and we have some successes there. So all that we can do is try to optimize as good as possible on the overall business model and to work on the costs and overall. But in general, the entire batch works with autonomous vehicles. So no intermediate solution that we came up with until now. Ask us again next year. But I hope we succeeded in the other projects.
All right. I would say 2 more. Okay. On this? Okay. Oh, okay. Then you.
Yeah, just very quickly on your question about when we are testing safety or security topics, I think it goes way beyond the dynamic testing, so to say. So there's a lot of static testing going on, and it's a lot of how the design needs to happen. So we work a lot on all the safety concept on the design together with our partners in order to ensure that the design is not exposing security and safety issues.
To the topic about empty vehicles moving from one place to another, have you considered moving something else than people? So still a human driver, but moving packages, moving whatever, where it doesn't matter when it happens, coming into the city or out of the city. Yes, we did.
And we want to focus on one model also, because as soon as we get this AD working, plugging 2 business models into this from day one, it's going to be difficult. You could also experiment with different, you could still move people door to door, like a cab in between. But as a company, as a value proposition, as a USP, we very strongly believe in the ride-pooling and ride-sharing case, because everything else would rather contribute to filling the street instead of... So the Verkehrswende image. Those things, we're not sure that those things would contribute to this overall goal. So it's very purpose-driven, basically. We had one last question, actually. And more, yeah? Can we make one exception? Because this hand was up very long, and the rest is very, very invited to talk. This person, this person, this person, right after.
Yeah, so the question for me is, how do you come up with end-to-end test cases for such a complex thing as artificial intelligence? So because I think the individual parts of a car are understood and could be well tested, and now we replace the only thinking part essentially by a machine.
It's actually interesting. We are in the middle of it. We're trying to understand that ourselves these days. So what I shared once was that we had some homework to do on the very generic BDD test cases on a very high level of what is this service, how should an autonomous vehicle work. And we have to look now again on the testing pyramid, which part we can push down somewhere else and tell other parties that are involved earlier in this pyramid to take care of this already because they can. Right? That's how you push down. You push tests down to the level where somebody is able to make a bare minimum test case of this, and then you see what is left, and that's the end-to-end part. And we finished the homework of describing the cases now in April, maybe, we're having these workshops, so that's the next thing that we have to do to understand really where to put them and on which level. And that's going to be very interesting because there are quite some of them. I think on the highest level, what will stay is rather generic KPIs about the service as a whole, because it will only, like at that point, we should just test if the entire business model around it is working, if we can deliver 95% of 2,000 trips that we are testing maybe with the real vehicle. If we are too nitty-gritty in the test cases on the then we're doomed, basically. No.
All right. I'm sorry that I have to cut so many of you off, but you will be here a little more longer, right?
Yes.
So we still have some snacks, and the fridge is also still full of drinks. So I'd like to invite you to stay a little longer. We have like an hour more to ask more questions with Finn and discuss and get to know each other. So thank you for joining tonight and have fun.